It is a sorry homecoming, seized in peace from war. Close to 2 million people who long for home, on the move to see what is left of their worlds. But this is a return to ruins. There will be no sanctuary when they arrive. They carry only their grief. This woman lost her son and entire family.
I lost my son and everything. What happiness can I feel after losing everything? We are the walking dead.
Even knowing she's returning to rubble, she hurries. Maybe there she can find some reminder of the world she lost. Until today, the Israelis controlled this area. The deal means they've moved away, leaving in their wake the ruins of land and of life. Ruins which stretch from north and south to east and west. Every war wreaks its harm, but it is rare for it to destroy so much of a country. At his age, he is starting again. A couple of bags to his name.
It's all ruins and destruction. Ruins and destruction.
The concrete skeletons stand like ghosts of old lives, reminding this was once a vibrant place, where the business of life was the conversation, not the business of death, where a three-legged chair would not be salvaged and cherished. If true peace means reconciliation, it is hard to imagine how that might happen here.
They destroyed our homes, they killed our children, they killed our women, they starved us and made us live in pain. But Palestine remains in our hearts.
For many, all that is left that's familiar is the sun and the sky above.
We lost our homes, our property, and our loved ones, but we have no choice but to return.
Gaza's land is changed, and so too its people. They have survived the war. They must now survive the peace. Emma Murphy, News at 10, Israel.
Well, as Emma said, whatever ruins remain, it is only now that they can be revisited as forces begin to retreat. The ceasefire came into effect at midday here, that is 10 a.m. UK time, and the Israeli Defence Forces immediately began pulling back, completing the first phase of their withdrawal as far as this yellow line. But the military still retains control of around half of the Gaza Strip. So what lies ahead? The UN has announced it will begin delivering scaled-up humanitarian aid into Gaza on Sunday. Israel has agreed to release almost 2,000 Palestinians. That consists of 250 prisoners serving long sentences and about 1,700 people detained in Gaza since the war began. Hamas, meanwhile, now has 72 hours to release all the remaining Israeli hostages brutally held since October the 7th, 2023.
Every house here is a bereaved family, bereaved family, bereaved family. A family, lost their husband, lost their daughter, lost their son, etc. Right? Everyone here has lost someone, just about.
For the survivors of Kfar Azar, this is the prefab village they now call home. It's just down the road from their kibbutz, right on the border with Gaza, where Hamas murdered 64 of their community, taking 19 people hostage. The last two, twins Ziv and Gali Berman, are believed to still be alive, and everyone's holding their breath here.
Now, it feels more real now than it has been for a very long time. So for now, it's like we call it reserved optimism. But once this deal actually goes through and we see the hostages coming out, then we can actually, truly be, whole again, happy again, and maybe breathe again, right?
For now, it's agonizingly tense. The borderlands near Gaza, a hinterland too. Not quite at war, but still a long way from peace. Gaza is just on the other side of that hill, and the Israeli military have now withdrawn within the strip to the agreed upon new lines of deployment. But just look at the columns of tanks behind me here. There is no real sign at this stage that Israel is beginning to shift large volumes of its military equipment away from the border. And while that will prolong Gaza's hell, it's comfort for these Israelis, showing gratitude to their soldiers whose presence they feel protects their families. It leaves them conflicted about what comes next.
It's very complicated because we're all hoping all of the hostages are going to be home immediately. But on the other hand, I, as a civilian that lives here nearby the Gaza Strip, I'm terrified because I know the enemy is still very strong. But stronger still is the faith now in Hostages Square, shared by everyone, from Matan Zangauka's mother to Nimrod Cohen's neighbour.
I'm smiling from the bottom of my heart because I can't wait to see him coming back and hugging his mother, hugging his brother, his father. They marked the start of the weekend here, already longing for it to be over, for it all to be over, finally.
And Rachel is in Hostages Square tonight. Rachel, you spent the evening there, as we saw, as they celebrate the start of the Sabbath now this weekend, which looks as if it will hopefully be the last they spend without their loved ones, or at least, of course, without the return of their remains.
That's right, and as you can tell, there are still people drawn to this place. It is Shabbat, the time when people gather together to celebrate the traditional Friday family dinners, a custom that is shared by both the Jewish and the Islamic faith. And there were long tables laid out here, families invited from across Israel to share in these moments of anticipation ahead of this release they've so longed for. So it was joyful, but it was also so sad too to see place settings that should have been there for those hostages that won't make it back, for the people who died on October the 7th. And then, of course, on the other side of this war, the tens of thousands of people who have died in Gaza. They are all missing too. The hope here is that 20 are almost on their way home. Einav Zangawa, the mother of Matan, who has campaigned tirelessly for his release, took to the stage and told the crowds here that these were nerve-wracking moments, but her face was covered in smiles. And that was very much the sentiment too, on a plane making its way back from Washington, because, of course, some of the hostages' families were there meeting President Trump when the news broke of this deal. That left them desperately struggling to get back in time for their loved ones' anticipated release because the flights are so limited here. In the end, the national airline stepped in, and one of them, herself a released captive, Arbel Yehud, knelt in front of a photograph of her partner, Ariel Kumio, who is still in captivity, and she wrote simply, "We've made it, just a little while longer, my love." And you can see the clock behind me here is still ticking upwards. After 734 days, they believe there are just 2 left. But as so many people waiting have told me, it now feels like those hours, minutes, seconds are crawling by as they try to get to this moment that they hope is coming and that they've so desperately longed for here.
OK, Rachel from Hostages Square. A tense weekend there ahead. Thank you very much indeed. Well, alongside the release of the last remaining hostages held by Hamas will be the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Today, Israel published all of the names of those who will be let go. And Emma is here with me, who's been looking at the details of all of this. Good evening to you, Emma. So what do we actually know about the names on this list and the faces and the characters of those who are going to be released?
Well, we know that 1,700 prisoners will be released in one batch, as well as 250, and that 250 are the most controversial here in Israel because they are seen to be the people that have committed the most serious crimes, have been convicted of the most serious crimes, amongst them murder. And as a result of that, it does cause an awful lot of political tension and also social tension that the agreement has been made to allow these people to leave custody, some of them serving life sentences. And the court system here was asked and has been allowed to review the names of those people who have been released, and they have basically taken the judgment that given the wider picture that we are dealing with here in terms of the ceasefire and not wanting to jeopardise that, they're going to leave it exactly as it is on the lists that have been correlated and not have a judicial input on it. They've heard the cases, but they're not going to overrule anybody. And that will have caused great concern and consternation for many families. In terms of the big names, the one name or one of the 5 names or so that they really had hoped within the Palestinian community they might get out is a man called Marwan Barghouti. He is a very significant figure for Palestinians. He is seen as a potential leader. He's seen as somebody who might potentially take over from President Mahmoud Abbas. But basically, the Israelis, I think, have thought this is too controversial a moment, even though he's had many conversations with, Israeli politicians over the years who feel that he is somebody who could represent the future of Palestine. So the fact that he hasn't been released is seen as a disappointment. But I think it's important to consider in the whole picture exactly what Hamas has got from this, which is 250 life sentence prisoners as well as 1,700 others. And also Israel have been able to say that they are not going to go ahead with the release of people who are even more controversial. So as we've seen so often in this whole situation, both are claiming it as a win. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
OK, Emma, we'll talk again before the end of the programme. Thank you very much for now, though. Well, the last 2 years of conflict in Gaza have been characterised by repeated calls for aid and the dire warnings about the limited supplies getting through. In recent months, just 20% of what's needed has made it in, according to the United Nations. Now they and other humanitarian organisations have permission to massively scale up the aid pipeline. Truckloads of food, medicine and tents should begin arriving on Sunday, but there are still major obstacles to overcome.
No part of Gaza has been untouched by 2 years of war. A narrow strip of land scarred, like the people who've endured this conflict. This peace plan offers fragile hope. But rebuilding Gaza will take more than the silence from the guns. Famine has taken hold in parts. Almost 500,000 people on the brink of starvation. For many here, a lasting ceasefire and open aid routes aren't just aspirations, they're the only lifeline left. But some say they still have mixed feelings. We cannot help but think of what is to come, this man said. The areas we are going back to or intending to return to are uninhabitable. You need more resources than the ones that Gaza has. That war's toll runs through every street, every home, every neighbourhood. Entire hospitals have been erased. This was Al-Shifa before the war. This is it now. As you can see, large parts of the complex have been destroyed. Amidst a healthcare system that's all but collapsed, those facilities still standing count supplies in hours, not days. For the young, education's replaced by the struggle to survive, with almost 90% of schools either damaged or destroyed. This image shows 3 schools in one part of North Gaza 2 years ago. Now, many buildings razed to the ground. Futures buried beneath bombs, shattering the promise of a generation. Before the war, 600 aid trucks crossed into Gaza every day. By this summer, fewer than 50. Now groups are calling for a flood of assistance, food, tents and cash before winter closes in.
A flood of aid means that we drive down the prices of aid in the market. A flood of aid means that the tens of thousands of people needing medical care and attention get it from mobile health units. A flood of aid means that acute malnutrition is banished from Gaza, because we have children today who are wasting away and they need help immediately. We're looking to all the parties, not just to the conflict, but to the range of countries who are committed to the implementation of this plan to see that the politics follows through.
Families return to what's left, to the wreckage of their homes and lives. The peace deal gives space but not yet safety, relief but not recovery. Promises on paper only matter here if they save lives in the dust of Gaza's ruins. Sejal Karia, News at 10.
The UK's Disasters Emergency Committee is renewing its call for donations to its Middle East humanitarian appeal in light of the Gaza ceasefire and plans to increase the flow of aid. Details of the appeal can be found at dec.org.uk, or you can donate via the number on your screen. Well, Donald Trump has claimed the credit for this ceasefire, even being lauded by Vladimir Putin today for his peacemaking efforts. And we can cross now to Dan in Washington tonight. Good evening to you, Dan. The US president, though, was passed over, wasn't he, for the Nobel Peace Prize today. Any reaction from the president to that news?
Well, no reaction to that, but reaction to Vladimir Putin's sort of fawning praise for President Trump. He actually posted on Truth Social thanking the Russian leader. The Russian leader had also said that the Nobel Prize had lost credibility. But I think, it's important to put this in context. Donald Trump was never going to win the Nobel Peace Prize. The considerations for it closed on January 31st. He'd only been in office for 11 days. And obviously those deliberations that went on this week took place before this Middle East peace deal was announced. But I think it's important to remember, this administration is extremely energized by this peace deal, perhaps looking forward maybe to next year's Nobel Peace Prize. But to give a sense of how last minute all of this is, we've talked to one source in Washington, D.C. who said that US agencies are sort of casting around on WhatsApp looking for prominent Palestinians who can help run Gaza. And you'd think that some of these details would have been thrashed out, long before, President Trump started heading off to the Middle East this weekend. Another interesting line is that we're hearing that Israeli intelligence are also really worried about who they are going to accept to run Gaza. They publicly said that they don't want anyone from the Palestinian Authority, they don't want anyone from Hamas. But there is a debate within Israel about who they would accept. Would they accept people who are Hamas in name only, if you like? Hamas's flag is dark green, so they refer to them as light green. That is something that they are going to have to grapple with to find the people suitable to run Gaza.